Warm welcome to you, Ria.
Amit, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So we just heard from Greg about the ecosystem business model and ecosystem strategy. So you've kind of lived and breathed it at New Relic. Talk a little bit about why New Relic had to go to an ecosystem strategy.
If I'm being brutally honest, Amit, we have no other choice but to go to an ecosystem strategy. And we've had this conversation many times offline. Just like Greg, as he was talking about his experiences working with channel leaders and CEOs across the board, we start and I've also been largely in the direct sales world as opposed to being in the channel world. And when we started, we, just like most companies, we started with a classic reseller motion and a classic SI motion. And what we realized along the way, and I came in with largely first principle thinking, because I didn't know how channels have been operating for a really long time, because I've always been partners with the partner team, not necessarily been in a partner role myself. So I tried to mimic what worked in the past. And clearly, what we found out over the last year and a half or two was that just is not going to be the way the partner world is going to work, and that's not how we drive value for our customers and for ourselves. So to answer your question, the simplest way to answer it is I don't know that there's any other way to do business with partners without the ecosystem.
Fantastic. And as New Relic was growing, you created and orchestrated an ecosystem-led motion there. Talk about your team, your challenges as you approach this. What was the perspective that you brought that changed the game, and how did you lead this change?
So first things first, when I came on board, obviously the first 2 or 3 months has really been understanding the landscape of where we are and what a partner ecosystem looked like, what the impact of the business was in driving revenue. And as many of you know, this is actually a indirect or overlay model as it's portrayed in many companies. So the challenge is always, okay, what value are you actually driving, and what processes are you actually orchestrating, and all of that. So for me to really understand the data, and then we had to go in front of the board to say, this is the plan for the partner strategy, and here's how we are driving it. And we are a product company. New Relic is an observability company. We are a product company, and we do not have a professional services team in-house. So our strategy to deliver services to our customers is largely through partners. So for that, we also had to groom an ecosystem of partners that can understand observability, that can be thought leaders, that can go deliver services. So when we went to the board, we told our board that we can't be operating in a model where we could just be working with partners that can do resell for us. We have to be working with a set of partners that can understand, that can develop that technical mind share, that can deliver services that also happen to resell our products. And that's the kind of partners that we wanted to go after. And in the consumption world, as you know, it doesn't work if you go and resell your products and you're out the door for 12 or 24 months until the next renewal happens, and then for you to come in and do the renewals again. So for us, it was really important that we are working with partners that continue to stay engaged, that continue to help grow consumption, value adoption, customers using our products, NPS scores going up, the whole deal. We sort of had to extend what our internal go-to-market sales teams are doing, or SCs are doing, and our CSMs are doing through our partner ecosystem. So we said we're going to focus on quality over quantity, but we are going to build for scale. But the kind of partners that we are going to invest in is going to be partners that can bring both the services and the sales mindset to the business. What we realized very quickly was when we go and develop those set of partners, there are a set of partners that have an appetite to do both. But if you go and nurture a set of technical partners, they always want to lead with services. They don't really care for sales. And then when you go in for scale, to the likes of SHIs and the CDWs of the world, they're all about the scale. They can put more boots on the ground than any company single-handedly can. But at the same time, they don't have the technical mindset and the mind share necessarily as deep as we want it to be, to be able to do that. So then we said, okay, we can't do this without an ecosystem of partners that can drive the value that we want to drive if we are truly building an extension of our own internal teams. So it's been a journey from the get go. We didn't know we were going to build an ecosystem from the get go. We knew what we wanted out of our partners, but we didn't realize that that's not going to be from a specific set of partners. It's got to be the ecosystem coming together. The customer is right in the middle of everything, and then the value creation happens from us as the product company, and then from various types of partners bringing that value, including our cloud providers that are massive marketplaces that have the reach and scale, and let alone the massive cloud commitments our customers have and want to burn through their cloud commitments working with product companies and services companies. So it was certainly a journey. We didn't start off by saying we're going to build a partner ecosystem or we are driving ecosystem led growth. I think the story sort of evolved as we learned and failed many times, but very quickly so, to learn from those and move on.
Yeah, it's absolutely exemplary the way you've led with hyperscalers like AWS and now with Microsoft and potentially more coming forward. The way we've orchestrated value with service partners, and this is where I think there's a lot of good comments in the community here about transcending types and tiers of partners. I think that's something that you guys have led and done very well. So meet partners and their business models where they are at, and then create value together. But this must be really hard, right? Systems are not easy, especially around ecosystem automation. So, how you've gone about kind of thinking about people, process, and data within New Relic?
Um, I think this is a time, and I don't know that the industry has seen such a huge paradigm shift in how we do partners like where we are now. We possibly have seen this one almost 10 years ago when cloud became a thing. That was the new shiny object. And then everybody figured out how to do partnering with cloud. I think we're going through one more of that now. Um, and I stay in close touch with my peers in the industry to see how what's working for them and what can we learn from each other. Um, and not many of them are too far or too different from where we are, which is we're all trying little things and we're all trying to figure out, okay, I think this is more effective to measure the impact and this is more effective to drive growth, right? So one thing that's really important, Amit, and I think you and I have talked about this, is the ability to have a team on the ground that has the grit and the willingness to fail,
Mhm.
the willingness to operate in an unstructured
Yeah.
thinking out of the box. And it cannot be the way we have done partners in the past. It absolutely cannot be the way we've done partners in the past. So for us, it was really important for us to have a team that were leaders in their own right and are able to willing to experiment and fail, and are also wanting to be part of this monumental shift that we are going through in where we are. So that was really important. It's by no means easy, if I'm keeping it real. It's been so bloody hard over the past 18 months to 2 years. But we've learned quite a bit. We have evolved our
Mhm.
strategy quite a bit. We haven't written our strategy document at one point, and then we said we're going to stick through the strategy because we quickly realized that the strategy has to evolve and how we
Mhm.
operate has to evolve. So I'm incredibly grateful for the team's grit as we persevere through all these changes and as we continue to evolve.
Fantastic. And I think this ecosystem mindset and the kind of new people that are coming into the ecosystem profession is just mind blowing. We are seeing people who are picking this as a profession, picking this consciously as a profession, learning the new ways of doing it, and that has created a lot of change. You've also focused a lot on ecosystem automation, like the process automation layer. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So to your point about bringing people on to the partner world or the ecosystem, like I said, this is my first official channels gig, but I can tell you, Amit, this is probably one of the most holistic jobs I've had. And Greg touched on this briefly, largely because one, you're working with a whole ecosystem of partners outside of your company. and you're nurturing and growing and building relationships and trust, and sort of that value exchange between two
Yeah.
companies to build that. And the second part of it is all internal, but you've got to build the confidence internally within your sales and technical sales teams to be the biggest champions of partners, from the outside in. And then you're working with marketing, and then you have operations that are different for partners, deal strategy, monetization, legal, fine. I mean, it's the whole deal. So it is one of the most holistic jobs that I have had personally. So for folks considering opportunities in the ecosystem, this is a great place to be getting that holistic skill set if you're looking for that. And as Greg said, there's a notion of, oh, this is an overlay business, and it's harder to prove value and show the impact. I certainly don't think so, especially in the evolution that we're going through. But it leads me to answer your question, which is the complexity of what you need to navigate as you work through a whole slew of external ecosystem
Yeah.
of partners and every function within the company that touches partners one way or another. So then what becomes really crucial is for all of you to see the same set of data, all of you to see a workflow of things that are happening, and how partners engage with our internal teams, and how we look at the same shared goals, and what are we trying to accomplish together. And I think what can get lost in all of this chaos and massiveness in the complexity is the value that we're driving for the one entity that is the most important entity, which is the customer.
Mhm.
So automation becomes crucial, and I think that's sort of how you and I met, Amit, which is we were right in the thick of solving some of the challenges, building our ecosystem of partners, and we said we're going to focus on quality over quantity, and we were going after less than 100 partners, honestly, over the last 12 months. And even that was really chaotic and complex for us to manage, and we were dying in spreadsheet chaos and management of a business plans or shared goals or processes.
Yeah.
How are we exchanging people, processes, content? And you touched on, there is legal sensitivity, but there is also competitive sensitivity as you exchange that information with your partners. So you sort of have to see the same data and the same goals through a unified set of perspectives. And that's where automation is key. And that's where you're not necessarily working within a company. You're actually working across hundreds of companies at this point. So what can be shared, what can't be? And you need to have the shared perspective and data to drive the right value for the customer. So that's why I think automation is really important. And I think that's why we have been working very closely together.
Absolutely. And you've shown tremendous progress to your board. You've been data driven. You've been process driven. I want to pivot a little bit to my last question, which is around economic environment that you see around here. Needless to say, people must have come here and talk to you about how did you make the case for your leaders to reinvest in partnerships this year in particular.
Um, so there are two reasons why every company does partners, and the two most obvious reasons, right? One is obviously driving the value. But as you think about why do I want to invest in a partner team, the first one is there is no company in this entire world that can put enough boots on the ground to sell their products and services within their company. So the first thing that you're looking for is scale and reach through your partners and the relationships that they have with the large enterprises, small and medium businesses, different verticals, different countries, and so on. The scale and reach is one thing. And the second one is your cost of acquisition and the cost of sale that comes along with bringing a dollar into the company through your direct sales team versus bringing a dollar into the team through the indirect ecosystem of partners. So as economic climates become challenging and interesting for companies, the way I think about this, and then this is sort of the conversation that our CFO and I have, which is how do we think about our cost of acquisition and cost of sale? And the most interesting and important thing to think about is we need the foundation. You can't really pull a rabbit out of your hat if you don't lay the right foundation to
Mhm.
bring in that cost of acquisition and sale down and get the reach. So you've got to invest in the foundation building that you need to get to that. But once you have that, it's very evident that your cost of acquisition and sale is lower, and the cost to maintain that dollar and the cost to renew that dollar is lower, because you have this whole ecosystem of partners working on your behalf, selling and servicing and trying to create the value for the customer on the other side of the company. Whereas with your direct sales team, obviously that is the higher cost activity. So what I have seen, interestingly, is there's more investment in the partner teams as we see economic challenges.
Yep. Thank you, Ria, for that perspective. You've been a tremendous role model, Ria, for both men and women, a tremendous champion for women. Uh, and there's a lot of interest in ecosystems and partnerships and people coming into this profession. What advice would you have for somebody who's just starting out in this journey, in this career?
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on this, Amit. Thank you for your kind words. It's been one of the most one of the most satisfying yet holistic jobs I have had, for the very reason that I pointed out, which is you are championing your company and your products and services to a whole world out there, outside of your company. Passionately selling and driving value and building that relationship, building the trust and credibility to be working together as one with your partner ecosystem. But internally, you're also working with possibly every function that there is out there to drive that together. So if you think about it, you're sort of operating in a general manager capacity, or sort of operating your own incubation of a company within the company, because you've got to bring all of it together, but this time
Yeah.
around for the partner ecosystem. So one thing, interestingly, that we did at New Relic is, as we shifted our perspective to how we think about partners, I asked my leaders that, I'd like to incubate marketing, for example. So we had partner marketing that used to report into our corporate marketing team. And I said, the goals and the KPIs that we are measuring our partner marketing teams are not necessarily aligned with what I want to drive with partner marketing, especially as we are going through this shift and transformation within the industry. So I'd like to incubate partner marketing within alliances and channels, so my goals and the marketing goals are better aligned to drive that change. So it really depends on the maturity of where you are in your company, right? If you are in a company where you are still defining what that
Mm.
value looks like, what those KPIs look like, what you're driving, I think you sort of bring those into an incubation mode and set the strategy forward, right, with the right KPIs to measure the value and the impact that you're driving. Greg said something that was just, I actually took note of it. He said something that's so obvious, but it's often not talked about, which is there is so much of work in processes and operations and data, and all of that goes behind the scenes to make the partner engine work as a growth engine. But it's often not seen because you don't
Yeah.
talk about it. You don't communicate that. You don't talk about it. And it's our jobs to make sure that those are better communicated and more visible, so people understand the value of what the teams are driving. But at the same time, as people come into a partner opportunity and jobs within this function, it really is what drives you. And there are some that are very structured and organized and all of that, where operations might be a better fit, versus as you think about driving more holistically, running a geography in driving something like that, brings you a more holistic perspective. So I've certainly enjoyed working with every aspect of the company and the functions that I've interacted with.
Fantastic. The GM experience that you talk about is just unbeatable. We have a lot of good questions from the community. I wonder how many I'll be able to take here. So a lot of good interest. So Chip, can you highlight one or two questions, please?
Yeah, I thought this was an interesting one from Craig Ginsburg. So do alliances and channels org sit in sales or in product or somewhere else? Good one.
I report into a CRO, and so he has responsibility for global sales and tech sales and enablement and the whole deal. I report into a CRO, and the way that it's organized at New Relic is we have sales leaders in each of the geos and the technical sales leaders that align with each of the geos, and I have equivalent geography leaders within each geos that run the partner business. So I partner with our CRO to drive the overall strategy. How should we think about, cloud marketplaces, resellers, GSIs, ISVs, the whole deal, and then the execution happens at the geo level as they work with the individual geos. So I certainly sit in the. I'm sorry. I certainly sit in the sales team, and I don't know that the partner team being organized in the product team is of much value based on my personal experience. Yeah, like I'm thinking what could be unique about having that team report into product, and I don't know that that's the best home based on my experience. The best home is certainly sales, because you need the tightest collaboration possible with your sales counterparts as they work with your customers, and that's where you get.
And I think this inflection around customer value orchestration is coming out because now partners are visible to the end customer, as Mike had remarked, right? So that makes sense. Perhaps in co-creation, you can collaborate with product organizations and co-create.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Collaboration is great. The one thing that I always tell my team is, as you sit in like business reviews and as you present to your leaders, as partner leaders, I can say the most amazing things about the value and the impact that the partners are driving. But I certainly hold back because I want my sales leaders and my technical sales leaders to talk about the impact and the value that our partners are driving, because that's most definitely very valuable for our leaders to hear, because as sales teams start to realize the value and the impact that partners are driving, that's very impactful.
So another good question from Baz, Ria, in the context of Greg's earlier observation that the world is evolving towards outcome-based value propositions. Do you see the same? And what could that mean for New Relic? Is there, for an example, an orchestration as a service offering possible?
Yeah, so absolutely outcome-based value propositions. I am all for it. Not necessarily in this role, but that's certainly something that's critical as we drive impact. And one of the things that I often tell my team is, okay, if you're putting a new program in place, if you're putting a new project in place, we will boil it down to what's the one thing that ultimately matters as we walk through this. And then as we start the meeting or as we start the discussion towards an initiative, we will line up 10 or 15 different things that we want to measure and the KPIs around it. And then we start to ask the question of, okay, so why does this matter? This matters because then they can go build pipeline. Okay, why does that matter? Okay, this matters because we need to bring teams together to create that engagement. And then it ultimately boils down to like one or two things. And every initiative that we drive ultimately boils down to one or two things. As much as measuring progress along the journey is important, I certainly tend to keep the team really, really focused on the end goal, because I don't want our teams to be distracted by the journey so much that we lose track of where we are going. So one of the things that certainly drives that behavior is keeping the end outcome in mind. And sometimes I joke with my immediate leadership team saying, if I wake you up in the middle of the night, what are the 3 things that are absolutely important to us? And I'll have them repeat it as a joke. But it is true. And they've started to do it with their teams too, which is like, what are the 3 things that we're all absolutely driving? And we all should be remembering this, because if you keep track of too many things, that gets lost in chaos. So outcome-based metrics are certainly important, but it shouldn't be 30 different KPIs that are measuring those outcomes. It should be the 1 or 2 or 3 things. And ideally, those are aligned with what your CRO is driving. It should be aligned with what the CEO is driving. And that's where you get the best alignment.
Fantastic.
Perfect.
There's so many good questions here, Ria. There's one more from Jennifer. When you see that your program is reducing support and renewal costs, how are you communicating and capitalizing on that to deepen relationship? Do you use metrics and tools like MDF, for example?
We certainly use WorkSpan, and we're actually experimenting with what that new process will look like as we think about some of that. Um, One of the things that we are experimenting with right now in how we resource our partner-based business. We're actually in incubation mode right now. We have a model that's well oiled and works really well now, but we are having some challenges to say, I'm going to put a pin on this one metric to say this drastically decreases the cost of sale, decreases the cost of renewal. So we're actually experimenting a people model, right? So and I go a little bit deeper, but I think it helps drive the point home, which is when you assign opportunities, when you have AEs in your sales teams assigned to accounts, it depends on which segment the AEs operate in. Sometimes in strategic segments, an AE is assigned to 1-to-1 or 1-to-3, versus in a enterprise segment, there'll be 1-to-10, 1-to-15, depending on the size of the accounts. One of the ways in which you sort of reduce the cost of acquisition and sale, you certainly need the relationship directly with the customer. You certainly need the function of an AE with the customer directly. But you can't be sprinkled across all of your sales segment, because then a specific set of accounts that are partner led, that are sourced and closed by the partner, needs less attention and less time from your internal teams. And as you put really expensive resources from your own company on those accounts, then you're losing the time and value that they could be driving in your more strategic accounts where there is no partner involved. One of the reasons why you have a partner ecosystem is because they understand your business, they know how to drive value, they know how to deliver services, they can be the thought leader, they can be you, they can be the voice of you in those instances. So what we're experimenting with is what kind of resourcing model makes sense on the sales side to drive that scale and expansion, which then becomes obvious, because then when you're measuring your partner business, your AE to customer ratio is not 1-to-10 or 1-to-50. It's actually 1-to-200, because majority of the account management happens on the partner side. And you're merely being the voice of your company for the customer should they need you. But you don't necessarily have to be at the customer door every day managing that account. That's the whole beauty of having that ecosystem doing work on your behalf.
Wow, what an insight there. I think this thing around partner-led model, we will have another conversation on this topic. I promise to bring you back because this is a massive transformation in process. With that, Chip, let's close the session. Ria, thank you so much, and thank you to the community for asking so many questions. There's a lot here, Ria. I'll send it to you. We'll get your answers offline and write a blog probably.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me, Amit.
This is fantastic, Ria.